The swordsman is the quintessential character in all medieval RPGs, and Wartales is no exception. Today we're going to be using Éowyn as our guinea pig here to be able to show off all of the different build options that you can have for your swordsman, their specialization options, the upgrades to those skills you can pick up through these skill masteries, and then we will round out our conversation by talking about equipment options, alchemical advantages, and synergies with other party companions. Without further ado, let's dive into it. The swordsman is a melee-focused class that does damage based on strength. Their most important attributes are going to be strength and constitution because they have to be fighting on the front lines. Also, a little bit of a splash of movement is very nice to be able to get them to where they need to be in those pivotal first turns of the battle. And of course, you can take some extra critical hit if you're feeling lucky. We've got Éowyn here up to level 5, but she has not taken any specializations yet, which has been absolute deadweight for the party up to this point. But now we are going to be able to do a little bit of save scumming and show off all of her specializations and the upgrades that you can take using these skill masteries. If you're unfamiliar with these, you can purchase these books that will offer upgrades to these basic abilities once you have won Smots Arena. I'm going to go through 3 builds that will allow us to show off all the different abilities here and how they can be improved and potentially used in battle. We'll be starting off with what is actually my favorite build path, going through Fighter, picking up Valorous Duel, and then grabbing Counterattack. The Fighter specialization will significantly increase our constitution and also allow us to play around with heavy armor. While this does restrict our movement, its defensive value is unparalleled, so we're going to go ahead and rock this set of full battle plate. Grabbing Fighter gives us access to Destabilizing Strike, which has potentially the coolest animation in the entire game. It's going to deal a nice chunk of damage based on strength and apply Destabilization to the target for 2 rounds. Destabilization will cut their guard value to 0, so this is really excellent to be able to chew through those tougher enemies who are wearing heavy armor and also carrying shields. Once we improve it with a skill tome, then we get an extra condition on the ability that is going to allow us to guarantee critical hits against enemies that have no guard value. This is absolutely amazing because there are plenty of enemies that are just wearing light armor that don't have any guard value to begin with, and then using this ability feels a little less beneficial because you're losing out on that extra criteria of applying the destabilization. Or once you have run into an enemy and already used it, it's lasting for 2 turns, it's up in the air on whether you want to spend the valor point on just getting the damage. Here you can guarantee the critical strike. Also, this synergizes incredibly well with how the fighters are tailored to using strength, because strength is going to increase their critical damage but not their critical hit chance. This means that when we crit, we do a ton of damage, but we're not going to be able to crit very often. So having a way to be able to guarantee landing critical hits really amps up the damage that our character has. Valorous Duel also happens to be my favorite valor point generation for this style of character. It is just so consistent to be able to generate valor points throughout the battle. You gain a valor point every time you engage with an enemy. It is just the most reliable. It's also kind of the most boring out of the different options, but I really like taking it on a lot of my characters. It also synergizes really well with this build of the fighter as the one-on-one tear your opponent to pieces, and we've picked up Counterattack as our final passive to be able to round out this build. Every time we engage, we gain Riposte, which means we get an attack of opportunity to be able to counterattack against the enemy who we are engaged with when they hit us. Attacks of opportunity, I believe, do 105% of your strength damage, so they hit pretty hard, and being able to get this is a nice way to be able to round out our damage. Improving it with a skill tome gives us a criteria, a bonus that we will receive when we disengage. So when we upgrade it, every time we engage, we gain Riposte. That's the same. Every time we disengage, we'll get Inspiration for 1 round, which will double our movement. Now, you don't usually want to disengage from your enemies, because then they get a counterattack against you just for free, and you don't want to be able to give them these extra hits to wear you down. But the situation where you do need to disengage is when there is a fire on the other side of the battlefield that you have to have this character put out. So Inspiration is going to make sure that they can be where they need to be in those really bad situations. I don't think that this is the best use of a skill book. I think that basically the entire value out of this ability is coming from gaining Riposte, and I really like it for that instance. So we're going to run through a little bit of combat to be able to show off how this fighter can perform. One of my favorite uses of the fighter is to be able to run them straight at the enemy commander right out the gate and be able to start weakening them down, engaging with them, and making sure that I rip the bonus they're providing to their entire team out from the very beginning. So we open up with Destabilizing Strike, cutting his guard down to 0, and then we're going to swing in here with Team Strike. This is my preferred weapon for the swordsman. It's a sword that gives you a decent bonus, but then you're also going to be able to amp up your damage the more allies you have around you. So if you keep your guys in formation, you'll be able to get a lot of work out of this. Some of your best characters to sync up with are your polearm friends. Over here we've got fervent support, so every time that our friend here, Aowen, is attacked, the polearm is going to come around and be able to do a little bit of damage to the aggressor. Though, as you can see with the stack of burning underneath my guys here, the enemy bombers have seen this as an opportunity to really make life difficult for us. There's the enemy striking back, we get a riposte, and then the polearm comes in to support, really showing the synergy that you can get with those chunk of units all together. We're going to come back to Aowen here at the start of the new round, and now here, the enemy's guard has been reduced to 0. That means destabilizing strike should be guaranteed to crit. Whoa! There it is, coming through. Not super impressive damage, but it is still being able to amp up. The crits are very nice to see. I always hated the bomber enemies, so here, destabilizing strike, the enemy has no guard ever. We gain the kill off of the crit, and we even get the little cutscene, 52 damage. It's a little bit higher now because we hit galvanized. Definitely overkill, but it's always nice to be able to seal the deal with some of those big numbers. While the fighter might be my favorite all-around build for my swordsman, the Swordmaster is definitely the highest damage build that we can grab. So we're going to pick up Swordmaster, giving us access to medium armor, laceration ability, and it's also giving us a chunk increase to our strength. We're going to grab Valorous Chain here, which is going to give us Valor points based on attacking multiple enemies in a turn. So if a single hit attacks more than one enemy, we'll be able to gain a Valor point. Hopefully, we will be able to trigger this multiple times a turn. That is really the key on picking this ability, this passive, better than Valorous Duel. Then we're actually going to go for Bulwark to be able to show that off. This leads to some potentially humorous but definitely legitimate ways to be able to amp up our damage and honestly leave the enemies scratching their heads. Laceration is very Valor point hungry, which is one of the reasons that I often stay away from this build in my swordsman. It costs 2 Valor points. You attack twice, doing 24 damage, so 100% of your strength in a small area right in front of you. You also have a condition on being able to trigger this ability, which is that you have to perform a certain number of attacks to be able to unlock it. Without upgrading it, you have to perform 2 attacks, and once you upgrade it, giving it a skill tome, it will only require 1 attack to be able to be unlocked. Now, this resets every time you use the ability, so it's not like if you have the initial version, you do 2 attacks, and then you can use Laceration for the rest of the battle. No, you use Laceration and then you have to do another 2 attacks to be able to unlock it again. Once we upgrade it, it goes down to only 1 attack, making it much more manageable. But I'm going to go ahead and show how you can kind of fudge the system for some awesome combos here. This version of the Swordsmaster would be really good with a 2-handed weapon, able to get a huge boost to your strength, but you can equally somewhat cheese the system by pulling in a torch, which is going to give you a free offhand area of effect attack. So this is another way that we can stack up being able to score more Valor points. It's giving us a little bit better critical hit chance, and this is the build that we're going to run with. Finally, let's talk about Bulwark and why we picked this up for our Swordsmaster. So every time this unit engages, they are going to gain deflection, which is going to reduce the damage they take by 70%. This is going to give us that little bit of extra durability because right now we don't have a shield and we don't have access to heavy armor. When we upgrade it, things get really interesting. It is very similar, mirroring the riposte and inspiration combo. So now once we've upgraded it, when we disengage, we gain Fury, which will increase the damage of our next attack by 50%. The game plan here is we charge in, we hit the enemies, we engage with one of them, we disengage, taking an attack of opportunity, but that attack is going to be reduced by 70% because of deflection. Then we engage again with Fury and trigger Laceration, but at 50% more damage, hopefully able to wipe out our enemies with that attack. We're opening up this battle against the Guard Militia, who are level 6 to our level 5, so I'm expecting it to be a slog, but let's see what Aowen can do for us with this new build. We spent some of our Valor points with Axe's initial onslaught here, so we're going to be open to being able to see how much we can generate out of Valorous Chain. Hopefully we'll be able to fund the use of Laceration here. So we're going to dive in, hopping over right here. We're using light armor right now instead of medium armor, and that is actually giving us an increase to our movement, which is very nice. Torch Strike comes in, it applies burning to both of them. It's going to upgrade, or it's going to access Laceration for us, and it's going to give us a Valor point. Now we want to be able to engage with somebody, so we're going to go ahead, engage with the captain, use the Team Strike. Engaging here gives us deflection, so we're going to disengage. He shoots us, and that damage is reduced because of deflection. It still hits, so it doesn't feel great. But now we can open up with Fury, with Laceration, and see just how much we can get out of it. And that is a pretty enormous opening turn. Now, just for good measure, and because the captain is about to go next, I'm going to throw Taunt over onto him so that we engage again and be able to get another stack of deflection up. Also, because Eowyn has been equipped with the Poison Vial, she's applied 2 stacks of poison over here, 3 stacks of poison over here, and burning to both of them. So an absolute status effect monster. That is the benefit that Laceration attacking twice really gives you. You might be thinking that, why does it attack twice? Why doesn't it just do all its damage together up front? And that's because getting these multiple attacks synergizes with some of the poisonous oils and other belt accessories that you'll be able to get to apply these bonus status effects. Let's see him try and punch back. Yeah, 1 damage with the deflection going. And then he just straight up dies because of the burning and because of the poison. That's what I call an opener. That enemy is over leveled compared to her as well. Ah, this is amazing. Twang's going to come in and offer Eowyn a little bit of help here. I think with this build, she can perform best running solo, giving her these high priority targets to take down with her DPS, throwing her at groups of enemies that you bunch up, so running her around a flank, I think is generally the best play, but obviously a little bit of range support when you most need it is always appreciated. We're going to go ahead and come back to Eowyn here, throw out the attack. We do still have deflection up, so we're going to disengage. We only get 10 there on that attack of opportunity. We gain Fury. And now it's time to move on out. I would like to be able to reposition to be able to fight this group of enemies over here. I feel like that's going to be a good use of Laceration. I don't know if I want to throw it right now. We'd be able to do 72 damage. Would it just kill him? It would. It would just kill him. Ah, 2 Valor points to be able to get a kill. And this is where the Valor points are just so hungry. You really need to be able to funnel Valor points into your Swordmaster. And with picking up, what is it, Valorous Chain, she's only going to be able to generate them if she's striking multiple enemies. So this is normally a good play to be able to eliminate an enemy, but it's cutting down our Valor points by so much. I just got to do it. We're showcasing the Swordsman. Ooh, and it came up short. Important to note that disengaging counts both when you choose to leave early or when the enemy dies. So now we have both deflection and Fury up. Let's swing out to the flank and be ready to try and catch whoever the backs of these enemies. We want to catch them as they collapse on our allies here. Ooh, Axe is going down. Okay, we're going to want to get support over there. Jab, this is your job. You're going to come up. We gain a little bit of brutality. That's nice. We throw over first aid to be able to heal him up, cleanse the burning. Unfortunately, we don't have range on Impale for that Phalanx Soldier. We're just going to throw up the Phalanx Strike if this foot soldier decides to collapse. And he does, excellent. Sometimes it's hard to be able to eyeball the sight lines on who they are going to target, because they're always going to come after the closest enemy. Time to start stacking the status effects over here. And we're in a prime position to be able to roll over the later stages of this fight. Eowyn will be able to come down here to support. And the area of effect abilities are much better used against fights with rats or wild animals, because they naturally bunch up so much more. We're still going to pop Laceration here. We have got Fury built up from last turn, so we get the 1 attack, 1 dies. We watch the animation, and we cut the other one to pieces. Score galvanized, and unfortunately we don't quite have the movement to be able to engage again. The more movement points you have here, really the better. You're going to be able to make good use out of them on your swordsman or your swordmaster here. Let's finish things up with a crit from our rogue, who is going to be next up on our list of character guides. So subscribe to the channel if you want to see as soon as his guide comes out. So we've seen the well-rounded build, we've seen the all-out aggression build, and now we're going to go for the support and tank build. We're going to grab Protector, Defensive, Stance, and Daring. Now honestly, this is a combination of the three abilities that I think are the weakest out of each of their level ups, but let's break down what they do bring. Protector is going to give us heavy armor. It's also going to give us a hefty chunk of constitution to be improved. So we're going to go ahead, put on our set of full battle plate, be as tanky as possible. It's also giving us encouragement, which in an area is going to give protection to all allies. As we improve it, then it's going to give protection to all allies for 3 turns instead of 2 turns, and the sneaky biggest upgrade that you're getting for using the skill book is extending the area to 6 meters instead of 4. 4 is the same range as the galvanized bonus that your camp commander is going to have, so 6 is really going to be able to reach a fairly large zone, and then you don't have to bunch all your characters up and just beg the enemies to tear you apart with area of effect attacks. Defensive Stance takes up your base action and is going to give you deflection. So what we were having through Bulwark via the passive, it means that our damage taken in the next attack is reduced by 70%. And if we are engaged in combat while we have the Stance active, we'll gain a Valor point. I think this is really pathetic Valor point generation, but I guess it's there. I think that the best piece here is you can use this on a character with a 2-handed weapon is the idea, because just carrying a shield will allow you to gain the same thing as long as you're willing to spend a Valor point. Finally, here we have Daring, and this reads, as long as a bonus is active on this unit, their attacks apply weakening for 1 round. Once we improve it, it just applies weakening. This means the enemy will be weakened, meaning that their damage will be cut in half for the rest of the battle. At first that might sound hilarious, and I think that the best build, if you really want to lean into this, is grabbing the 2-handed sword that gives you the charge attack so you can run through enemies, cut down their movement speed, and at the same time cut their damage in half, and then you just have this Protector running around reducing the damage of the entire enemy team. But if you really think about it, to be able to get it to apply to a significant number of enemies, you're going to have to take a couple turns to be able to do it, and then you might as well have just spent a couple turns killing off enemies so they don't get to attack you at all. My personal playstyle is certainly more damage and DPS focused than tank or utility. Nevertheless, let's see if we can show off what these abilities are able to do. Let's use encouragement here. Very large zone. Throw it down. Now all of our friends here are going to have protection for 3 turns, taking significantly reduced damage. Also, a beautiful thing is that we also receive protection that is left off of some of the other utility builds from different classes. We're going to rush up to the front here. We've used our defensive stance, so not only do we have protection, but we've also got deflection up, meaning that the enemies have virtually no chance of doing any damage to us. Wolfie takes a shot. It is reduced, though the wolf is so fragile, it's going to look flimsy no matter how you cut it. Let's see how well Eowyn fares, taking the brunt of the enemy charge. 1 damage. There we go, stacking protection and deflection. The unkillable tank. Now, of course, deflection only lasts for a single attack, but we've still got protection up for a couple rounds, so our durability should not fall off too much. Oh no, 5 damage. And Eowyn's doing just fine. The damage just feels really low with this build. There doesn't seem to be too much interesting to do on their turns once you have thrown up encouragement, and then, I mean, once it's wearing off, you're going to try and find a position to be able to reapply it to your allies who need it. But they're not going to be doing anything spectacular on the offensive front, that's for sure. I feel like your characters do reach a point where they just become too tanky and the enemies are never going to be able to get through their health, so adding additional defensive abilities ends up not being very useful. If you're going with this build, you're definitely going to want Taunt as a basic ability to force enemies to engage with them a little bit more often and potentially pull them away from squishier, more damage-oriented allies, or you could spice things up by pulling on a two-handed weapon, something to amp up your strength and be able to give you a little bit more damage rather than the full guard build with the extra shield. I just realized I didn't specifically call it out, but there is a lot of synergy between encouragement and daring, because as soon as you open up with encouragement, you have protection for 3 rounds, which means all of your attacks are going to be applying weakening, reducing the enemy's damage, and that's part of why the enemies were barely able to even dent Eowyn's armor. Now that we've seen all the skills, their upgrade opportunities, and the swordsman in battle, let's round out the conversation by talking about equipment. Sword and Shield is my preferred way to go, especially because you get to amp up the DPS through Destabilizing Strike or Laceration if you're going with the more aggressive specializations. The two-handed swords are fine, I just don't find any of their strikes to really grab me the way some of the big two-handed weapons for your warriors and brutes can, with some really devastating effects. The one-handed sword allows you to be more surgical with your strikes, and that's how I prefer to use my Swordmaster, throwing them at a priority target that I want to be engaged with and just have that swordsman wear them down. To pair with this, my favorite one-handed sword is the Companion's Ulfbert's sword. It gives you Team Strike, so it deals a good chunk of damage based on your strength, but then the damage is going to be increased by 50% for each adjacent ally. This damage is honestly perfectly serviceable on its own, but if you choose to form a tight pack who are going to fight in formation, then you can see some really good numbers coming out. Give your swordsman an animal companion or pair them up with a polearm who naturally has really good support abilities for fighting in tight formation, and you're going to have a great combination for holding a flank against potentially overwhelming enemy numbers while the rest of your units are able to walk over the other zones of the map. Your 3 best occupations for your swordsman are going to be blacksmith, cook, or miner. Blacksmith giving raw strength, cook giving raw constitution, and miner giving a combination of the 2 once you level it up. Here at the base level, you only get the constitution. But once you hit companion, you're looking at 4 constitution and 2 strength, which is a beautiful combination for the swordsman. For your belt accessory, you're going to be looking for something that can amp up the damage at least a little bit through some kind of status effect or a bonus, or even go for just more mobility through adjustable straps. If you want to add an oil to augment your weapon, then I will say strength oil is a bit of a trap. I don't have too many of these unlocked, but definitely going for something like acidic oil or poisonous oil is going to help amp up your damage output. Even the sharpening oil here, giving you extra critical hit chance, is going to pair well with how strength amps up your critical damage. This wraps up our guide for the swordsman, an incredibly flexible class able to fit into a number of different roles depending on their equipment and specializations. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything, and also let me know what your favorite build for your swordsman is. If you guys like these guides, we can go through all of the classes. Subscribe to the channel so we make sure that you get to see those videos as soon as they come out. Until next time, thank you guys for watching and have a good one. Alright, for the save I'm going to go Fighter, Valorous Duel, and Counter-Attack. As fun as the Swordmaster Valorous Chain Bulwark build was, I feel like this is just a little more reliable.